Kenya has three gazetted areas, so to say. The first is national parks that are under the national government. Then we have the national reserves under the county governments, and conservancies, which are then either community conservancies or private conservancies. The data shows, or the fact is, that 70% of all the wildlife is found outside the national parks, which means if 70% is outside the national parks, we have a critical area where the wildlife is found, and that is the conservancies. And therefore, conservancies are a critical partner, a critical role in this space of wildlife conservation. We also know that over time and historically, government's funding is only available in the gazetted national parks and not in the conservancies. And therefore, the conservancies have not benefited from government resources. And like we have said, they hold a critical percentage of all the wildlife. It is in that realization, and guided by the Kenya Kwanza agenda led by His Excellency the President, who came up with policies that are really community-centric, caring about communities and the connection between communities and wildlife conservation, and what communities can do to ably participate in the wildlife conservation. We do know that the communities that coexist with wildlife has quite a lot of dilemma. They have mixed feelings. On the other hand, they are very happy to participate in the conservation areas. They realize it is a good natural resource, it is our heritage, and a very big tourist attraction. But on the converse side, they get vexed and annoyed when there are conflicts. We have seen that human-wildlife conflict affects lives, affects crops, livestock, and even other livelihoods of communities. And in that regard, you find communities are not very happy when there is a conflict. Therefore, there is need to work around getting a formula of coexistence between the human and wildlife, so that we can have a win-win situation. It's critical, it is important, it is imperative to support conservancies, and especially community conservancies, in terms of infrastructure development, like access roads, because when you have access roads, then you open up the areas, you find that communities have a way of transport, you promote trade, education, even those going for health services are able to use the roads. So there is overall benefit to the communities. And then if you look at the water and water infrastructure, water is a critical resource, and lack of water is one of the major causes of the conflict, because animals and human beings are competing for the water, and therefore the ministry has found it very critical to support the conservancies in the provision of water that can be used for wildlife, it can be used for livelihoods, for agriculture, and all the other sources of water. And that sort of brings harmony and reduces the conflict. That conflict is very expensive. When there is damage, people expect compensation, people are left suffering, and it is therefore much easier to have coexistence and reduce the conflicts, rather than always go the compensation way that becomes almost unaffordable. And therefore the ministry is really focused to working on the conservancies.
in a bid to incentivize communities, in a bid to appreciate them providing space, critical space for wildlife. So I have to do a fair and balanced budgeting. I also have to keep a relationship with county governments and county governors because of national game reserves, which is under their jurisdictions, but also conservancies, because the conservancies are under the jurisdictions of county governments. I have to do a lot of listening on all stakeholders, on what the challenges are. And I think my biggest role towards conservancies is to, one, compensate. It's a heavy duty. The budget implication is really heavy, but also to make sure that communities accrue and share benefits from the wildlife resource. So in that way, we then look at how can we put money in places to unlock benefits, and these benefits should flow to the members of the communities. The source of funds for development of conservancies, like I mentioned, it's the first time that the National Treasury put a budget for infrastructure development in support of community conservancies. That is a huge milestone in this country, but the funds are really little when you compare with the needs. So I also talk a lot with development partners. I have a working MOU with USAID, TNC and WWF, among many other development partners that after we map out the challenges in conservancies together with the Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association, which is the umbrella body for all conservancies in the country, we then approach development partners and ask them to bridge the gap. And I am happy to say a lot of development partners have been able to support work of conservancies. We also apply for grants such as the GF, the Global Environmental Facility, the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. These are mechanisms or funding mechanisms available for member states that are either signatories to UNFCCC or CBD for climate action and other environmental related issues. So I'm just in receipt of a 10.6 million USD grant from GF that is going to support a lot of conservancies. I'm also in receipt of a 3.8 million USD grant from the GBFF through the World Bank that is also to support the work of conservancies, especially linkages through corridors and dispersal areas report, and we are pursuing many, many more. For me, it is clear, I think because I have been born and brought up in an area where I've seen conservancies work in the background of Laikipia County. It's very clear in my mind that we have shrinking space for wildlife. It's very clear that tourism continues to be a big driver of the economy of this country, and that wildlife is the biggest driver of the tourism sector. And communities and private people who own land become our critical partners in conservation. But if we do not incentivize them enough, then, conservancies are a voluntary creation. An individual, members of a community, in their own voluntary mind and spirit, decide that they want to gazette this as a conservancy. If then as government, and especially as the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, do not incentivize them enough, they are at liberty to convert that land into real estate, into agricultural land, into other land use forms. So we are at a critical stage where we have a nexus between conservation and infrastructure and development. And we must keep communities interested in conservation if we are to continue as a country to be a leader in conservation, a global leader in conservation. We are facing competition from our neighbors, and we do not want to go to a place where we'll say Kenya used to be. We want to remain to be a leader, and we want to move with the communities as part of our lead stakeholders. My dream is that conservation becomes so beneficial to both country and people that people will want to come back and say, I own 100 acres, you own 500, you own 50. Can we bring it together and register it as a conservancy? The conservancy model is such that it is multiple land use. So it is not that you set up land outside and we put it for wildlife. The land is managed through a management plan that allows you to do wildlife conservation, do tourism, do cattle ranching, do crop agriculture, and many other means, but in a very regulated, in a very organized way, as guided by the management plans. My dream is that we will find healthy, happy communities in far-flung areas in this country. My dream is that conservancies will create security in very insecure prone areas. We've seen in places where there's a rhino sanctuary, the security just goes up 10 times fold. We hope that conservancies will create a lasting solution to the insecurity in Pokot and Baringo, Samburu and Laikipia, where people are interested in conserving their land, they're interested in conserving for wildlife, for their livestock, and even for posterity. We want people to drive conservation as opposed to Kenya Wildlife Service, as opposed to Government of Kenya. I want to see communities embrace and are happy about it. But for me to do that, I need to clear a backlog of compensation. I'm aware it is now over 15 billion and counting. So we're also hoping that we mitigate more instead of compensate. Tourism sector is private sector driven. But then it becomes impossible to ask an investor to put up a hotel if they have to start by getting a road, then sourcing energy, then finding water. So we decided as government that would provide the infrastructure that would enable private investment. However, this financial year, we are moving a step forward and putting tourism facilities in some of the very high potential conservancies, community conservancies, that we feel investors might have a challenge in going there, but also just to encourage them that it's possible. Once the community starts feeling the benefit from a government facility, then they will put their house in order in terms of land leasing. You find sometimes there's a lot of push and pull. When an investor wants to put up a facility, some members of the community are opposed, so we want them to first feel, and then it is them who will come calling and asking the investors, please come and put a second facility. We're also doing water, and we're doing water, I think, fivefold. We're doing water in wildlife areas so that the wildlife stays there and doesn't go to the community. We're doing water in community areas so that the community stays there and they don't go to the wildlife area. We're doing water so that it also serves the livestock as a way of them benefiting from the wildlife resource. We're doing water also to support small-scale agriculture. And it is proving to be a very efficient mitigation measure for human-wildlife conflict. We are doing energy, but through development partners largely. And we are tapping into natural renewable energy, sun and wind power. So those are some of the things that we have started. The documentary that you will see will tell you the kind of impact they're having on the people. Public participation, number one, is a requirement under Article 10 of the Constitution. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 has mandated us not to think that we can think for the people of Kenya exclusively. It is coming out clearly by the day that even when we think an idea is good, it is good to run it by them. So one of the things we did was call the entire Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association to a meeting, all the CEOs of the 12 region associations, and asked them, what is it that you need to grow as conservancies for communities to feel more at ease, for development, for benefits? And that's exactly what they told us. So the ideas were jointly mooted. We then told them to go back to their landscapes because the associations are landscape based. So we told them to go back to their membership organizations or member conservancies and ask them what are the priorities. So I only got a list from the member communities on what they needed. I went further to go to the ground, to ground truth a bit, and inquire if this is what is their priority. And once I ascertained that, then we went ahead to start the development. You realize a road is not a piece of paper that you can sign without them knowing. They can physically see it. So immediately the machinery is on the ground. They will want to know where is this road going. Kenyans are very inquisitive. They want to know who is doing it. And of course, there's a whole big banner that is a requirement for a project that says it's being done by the State Department for Wildlife, and this is the contractor. This is the the details on the project.
KWC is a membership organization developed 11 years ago through the partnership of the State Department of Wildlife, Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, to cater for the interest of private and community landowners across Kenya who host wildlife on their land. KWC was established to address a calamitous decline of wildlife as a result of significant habitat change that was happening in our country, and also to bring benefits to local communities who live with wildlife. Over the last 30 years, conservancies have been emerging and developing in Kenya as a strategy to create local institutions that cater for the needs of the communities that host wildlife through establishing governance and management structures that look at how these communities can better benefit from wildlife, how human-wildlife conflicts can be addressed, and more importantly, how these communities can benefit from the wildlife on their land. As a result of that, we now have over 200 conservancies across 30 counties in Kenya, covering over 15 million hectares of land in Kenya. And these conservancies are already promising to address the calamitous decline of wildlife that we have experienced in the country. But over the years, as we continue to develop these conservancies, one of the key gaps we realized was that because of their general location and the environment, majority of these conservancies are in dry areas of Kenya where access is a big challenge and where water is a major constraint and often a trigger to human-wildlife conflict. We partnered with the State Department of Wildlife to look at strategies to address these serious concerns. And we went through a public participation process. We engaged the CEOs of the landscape associations. We also engaged our National Conservancies Council. Two emerging concerns were the issue of water. It is important that water is availed in strategic places so that wildlife do not venture into human homes and into homesteads and water points used by livestock. We feel so fortunate that the State Department assigned resources to support priority areas that were selected by the community themselves and by their leadership. And we ended up constructing a number of roads in priority conservancies and a number of water facilities in water-constrained facilities, conservancies rather. The water facilities are proving really useful in the sense that now wildlife are able to reach to water points without having to go to human settlements, and that helps in minimizing conflicts and reducing the government burden to compensate for the losses of wildlife. It is also important to have these access roads, and some of the conservancies where the roads have been built, I just visited more recently Suswa Conservancy. Mount Suswa is very close to Nairobi, has amazing tourism potential, but that potential could never be harnessed because of lack of access. The State Department organized and brought in a team to improve the roads, and right now tourists are able to go all the way to the crater to see wildlife in Mount Suswa. And because of that, tourism potential, tourism investment become something that is a reality. And we are now working with the State Department to begin also developing tourism facilities and tourism activities in these conservancies, so that then they are able to generate resources they need to do management, and even more importantly, to improve the livelihoods of the communities and bring about local development. At KWCA, we've been receiving feedback on the water pans and the access roads that have been put in place, and these have been positive feedback. The alleviation of water stress and the possibility of now bringing in investors have become a reality in places that communities may never have felt that this was an option for them. We do, of course, realize that not all conservancies benefited, and we still encourage and support the ministry to provide additional resources to other conservancies, because in many of the feedback we've been receiving, we've been told that these projects are game changers in their localities.
We hope that conservancies will create a lasting solution to the insecurity in Pokot and Baringo, Samburu and Laikipia, where people are interested in conserving their land, they're interested in conserving for wildlife, for their livestock, and even for posterity.